Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
You know, our guest today is Brad Rhoads, and this guy's resume is unlike very few that you'll run across. He's a full-time attorney, but also a lay pastor of marriage ministry and the founder of GraceMarriage. He and his wife run GraceMarriage and GraceMarriage at Home. And this man has got it going on when it talks about how to treat his wife and how to love his woman and model it for others in the church. And to me, that is my love language. That is my first ministry, is to my spouse. And I love when I find kindred spirits. So thank you, Brad, for what you're doing. He talks about the importance of dating your spouse and how that looks. And just, Marianne, if you could pick one date, like you got to call the shots, not Chad's surprised you and done all this stuff. If it were all up to you and he just said, honey, I'm just going to get in the car and you go and do what you want to do, what's that date going to look like for the Howard crew?
Okay. Well, it's going to involve, I'm a foodie, so it's going to involve some sort of exotic food from another country. And it really probably Thai or Indian or Mediterranean. I'll take one of the three. And then honestly, it's not so much going somewhere as much as, I would love to be on the back porch and create like a country honky tonk dance floor and have conversation by the fire. I'm really not, I think I would have said something very different 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. But I value my time with him. And so whatever it's going to be something where we're together and we're having conversation. I just think we're at that point in time in our life where that time and what we're talking about, we call it love mapping. You've heard me talk about that thing before. We call it love mapping because we're always changing. But that would be the ideal way to spend time with him.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh my goodness. See, the problem is I know this sounds like humble bragging or whatever, but I really want to do what makes her happy. Like that, if I had a choice that I would have a hard time going, we're going to do all the stuff that I like to do. Cause I know that she doesn't want to do that. Like I try to find a common ground that we're all going to have fun, but things that we both like to do, like when it was her birthday, I took her to the Grand Ole Opry. We lived in Nashville our whole life, and we've no friends that are artists or whatnot, and we've done backstage, but we've never actually bought tickets and sat in the audience and just went and experienced the Grand Ole Opry. And we did that last week and took her to vintage shops, and she bought some clothes and found them little monkeys, figurines, and all this stuff. But for us, it'd probably be something that involved hiking and camping. Like getting out away from it all. And if I were to show up at her office with camping gear in the back of my truck and saying, we're going away for this weekend, you carry this 75-pound or 45-pound backpack and we're going to go walk for 4 miles out into the woods, some women would be like, you have lost your mind. Lena would be in hog heaven. And so
she'd be crying. She'd be so excited.
She would be so excited. That's what I love the fact that both of you, it went simple. It wasn't about sitting in the lap of luxury. It's about that quality time and tuning the rest of the things out and, us two, and that's it,
That's it.
Hey guys, if you are a man, a husband, get ready, dudes. He's going to give you gold.
Yes.
And ladies, you can also learn quite a bit from this. I think it speaks to spouse care and the importance of prioritizing your marriage, no matter what you do for a living, the importance of that. And so tune in, get you a pen and paper, take some notes, and we look forward to chatting on the other side of this. Here's Brad Rhoads.
Did you know that because of D6 Heroes, Randall House and D6 Family are able to equip families far and wide in the area of generational discipleship? Due to the financial gifts of both individuals and churches, D6 curriculum has been translated into multiple languages and distributed across the globe, including restricted access countries for use in the underground church. In short, because of the financial gifts of individuals like you, moms and dads all over the world can pass their faith to the next generation of believers. Would you consider becoming a D6 hero? A D6 hero is an individual who invests their financial resources in the ministry of Randall House and D6 Family to ensure that believers can transfer their faith through the church and home. Please visit d6hero.com to join the ranks of our heroes and to explore other areas where your financial investment can have an impact.
We are live from the D6 conference in Orlando, Florida, and today I'm joined by Brad Rhoads. Brad and his wife, Marilyn, have 4 daughters and a son. He practiced as a full-time attorney for over 20 years, and he's been a lay pastor of marriage and family at his local church since 2010. Together, Brad and Marilyn co-founded GraceMarriage and GraceMarriage at Home, which serve thousands of marriages. They also lead marriage retreats, author marriage coaching materials, and speak on the importance of prioritizing and discipling marriage in the local church. Brad, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I want to ask, what is one of your favorite dates to take your wife on?
Well, everybody's different, so I think it's helpful to maybe think of it differently. What we do is we take turns choosing the date and get a total free ticket for selfishness. So basically, Marilyn, whatever you want to do, I'll just do it.
Okay, so then I have to ask, how many pedicures have you had in your life?
No pedicures. We sat at a pool and talked. We've done that, but she picks the car we drive, what we order, everything, and I'm out.
Okay.
And then the next date, I'll pick it.
Yeah.
So she rides in a golf cart while I golf 9 holes. We'll go to a sports bar, watch a Cardinals game, and we just sit and watch TV, and I can watch TV during the date. But it's like I want to bless her, and she wants to bless me, and this is a way that it's a ton of fun. Plus, it brings intentionality into the date.
Yeah.
And we don't get into that back and forth thing. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? So it's a really good pattern just to take turns planning and choosing the date, and then have the other one go along with the other's interest.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I might adopt that
It's
myself. Fun. So here at D6, you are having a breakout called How to Solve the Marriage Crisis in Your Church. And marriage is difficult. Everyone who has been married would say that there are difficult times in marriage. But it's also a beautiful picture of the gospel lived out. However, in saying that, there are some people who can't imagine the beauty being that in the marriage that they're in, unfortunately. You know, it might be that they have an abusive spouse, or someone who isn't a follower of Christ, or maybe someone who claims to be a follower of Christ but actually doesn't. And I think we can all agree that the family is under attack from every angle. So what would you say the research is saying recently about marriages, in particular even in the church?
Well, there's a community study that showed that 72% of churches have no marriage ministry whatsoever. 72%.
Wow, that is a lot.
So if we're proclaiming marriage is the most important horizontal relationship, but then we're giving it no priority, marriage will be no more important to couples than it is to the local body. And as long as the local body leaves that space open, will continue to have decline. Scripture says we are salt and light. And for too long, we've been trying to overcome family dysfunction with weekly programming. And I love children's ministry. I love youth ministry. But unless you supplement it by strengthening the family, strengthening a marriage, you're kind of pouring water through a net trying to fix it through weekly programming. It needs to be a supplement to healthy marriage and healthy atmosphere. And we need to pour energy and resources. One pastor, where I preached recently, asked for the forgiveness of his church that we have not made marriage a pillar of our church sooner. And that marriage affects everything we do. Yeah. Our giving, our finances, our children, our youth. Everything we do as a church depends on the health of the marriages of our church. And he said, from this point on, we will pour resources, time, and effort into marriage. And we will have a more healthy family and we'll have a more healthy church.
Well, that sounds beautiful, but what does that actually look like? Maybe there's a pastor or a church leader listening who's like, okay, I want to do that. Yeah. Now what?
Yeah, what it looks like is you have ongoing youth ministry. You have ongoing children's ministry. Now you have ongoing marriage ministry. And what we do as GraceMarriage is we provide an ongoing marriage discipleship path for couples to have a platform to work on their own marriage. Plan things, do things, deal with issues, celebrate wins, revisit the power of the grace of Jesus Christ, and get on a growth track in their marriage. So instead of a church waiting, right now the church's first interception with the couple that's in marriage is when they're near divorce. Mm-hmm. They call the pastor, we're in crisis, we're in an affair, whatever it is, and we need your help. And as long as we wait until they get to that point to help them, we will continue to decline. It is getting them early while they're at a point of stability and shepherd them, discipling them in a way that we're moving them toward thriving, not watching them slowly drift into crisis and then somehow trying to pick up the pieces. Pastors tell me marriage crisis counseling is so frustrating and so harmful to a church. And I'm saying, well, then it just makes sense to do something to prevent it.
Right.
In preventing crisis isn't that hard. If couples get grace at all, spend time together and talk consistently, they don't hit crisis typically. The problem is life takes over, they get busy, difficult things occur, and they never set out, but a slow drift occurs to the point that they're in places they never dreamt they'd be.
Now, I know you talk with a lot of pastors, and as a ministry leader, as a pastor, you often feel the weight of the people that you're shepherding, what they're walking through. What can you say to encourage that pastor or church leader that feels like he has the weight of the marriages in his church on his shoulders?
Well, number one, the qualifications of an elder, manage your household well. So the number one thing you can do is just have a blast with your best friend in the world, and that's your spouse. If they want to know how to love a woman, just let them watch you love your wife. If they want to know what romance looks like, watch you. They want to know what kindness looks like, watch you. They want to know what grace looks like, watch you. And then you enjoy an amazing marriage with your spouse. And that's the number one thing you can do to help the marriages. If you model that as a pastor, it will organically move your congregation forward. If you get dominated with ministry, you're tired, you're stressed, and your marriage is stable but not attractional, at best you'll have stable but not attractional marriages in your body, and you'll keep having them birth into crisis. And if you're experiencing that, it will naturally come out in your preaching, it'll naturally come out in your ministry. The biggest barrier to marriage ministry in the church is dominated pastors who aren't having a blast with their best friend in the world. Those that are having a blast with their best friend in the world can't help but talk about it because out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, and they can't help but make it a priority because they see what a gift marriage is, and they want their body to experience it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We are talking to Brad Rhoads about marriage and the marriage crisis in the church. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Start connecting with your family today with the D6 Family app. Available for free. Based on Deuteronomy 6, D6 is the leading voice in family ministry. Scripture teaches that parents are the primary disciplers of their children. The D6 Family app delivers resources that are updated weekly and designed to equip you for generational discipleship. Resources include family fun questions, weekly splinks, parent pages, family fun nights, foundational talks, the D6 podcast, and more. Connecting with your family has never been this easy or fun. Download the D6 Family app today.
All right, Brad, we are having this conversation about marriages in the church. The church globally is facing a marriage crisis. So can you give a church some starting points? So I hear you saying we need to make that a priority. We need to make it a priority in the church, and that filters into everything else. But where does the church actually start? So you say we have children's programming, we have youth programming, we have marriage programming. What does that marriage programming actually look like?
What it looks like is, well, if you work with Grace Marriage, what we do is we equip the local church with marriage ministry. So it's lay-led, it's participant paid. Two big barriers are pastoral time and church budget. So we made it a participant paid model that's lay-led. And we provide a church everything from promotion to curriculum. We'll have 7 years of curriculum because it's ongoing.
7 years.
We're
wow.
6 years almost completed. We'll have 7 by the end of the year. So awesome. every small group that meets, every quarter that meets, we equip the local church. We try to do everything so you won't have to. And then we have 100 churches in our network, so we learn from them. So we've evolved over 6 years. So we've learned what doesn't work. We've learned what does work. And we're continuing to evolve. So our longing is that every Bible-believing church in America has an ongoing effective strategy to disciple and shepherd marriages. Mm-hmm. And we no longer just do premarital and then crisis.
And crisis, right.
I mean, I had a pastor tell me, he said, the only thing we're missing in marriage ministry is a marriage. We got a lot of premarital, we got a lot of crisis.
Because you're right.
Yeah, we've got this. It's like we pour a lot of resources into marriage, but none of it's in the marriage.
Yes,
it's all pre-marriage and all when they're at the edge of divorce.
That is, you're exactly right. So earlier, you and I were having a conversation. This is obviously before the podcast interview started. We were talking about the infrastructure within a church. And so what if a church doesn't currently have an infrastructure to support something like that? Like what are some things that they can do to cultivate healthy marriages if they're not partnering with GraceMarriage yet?
Well, one thing, you don't really need an infrastructure to do marriage ministry. So say you're a church of 40 couples, 40 people, and you have one group that meets quarterly or meets this, and you have 6 couples in it. You're shepherding the couples in your church. We're in churches as big as 23,000 and as small as 30. But churches at 30, they may have 5 couples that show up every 90 days and have a platform to work on and plan their marriage. In a church that's much larger, it'll look a lot different. But it doesn't matter the size of the church. It doesn't matter the infrastructure of the church. It just matters that we're going to make marriage a pillar. The DNA church, Christ in the church, husband and wife. The Bible starts the marriage. The Bible ends with the marriage. And evangelism is ineffective if it's not even transforming our own families.
You're right. Is there any research that's backing up what you've done with GraceMarriage? Like, how are the couples affected on the backside of that? Like, they've been involved for a year now, or 2, 3, 5, 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are their marriages transformed at the end of walking through that?
Well, one, there's no end. Because basically everything takes ongoing attention to thrive. And we have to change the mentality of how people use marriage. My marriage is going to take ongoing investment, ongoing work. But for me, it's a ton of fun to work with my very best friend in the world, Marilyn Rhoads, and enjoy her and work with her. I mean, it's a great gig. It's the most fun ministry I do, is to have a great marriage with Marilyn. But what we've seen is like 95% of the couples that go through GraceMarriage say it helps our marriage. We enjoy it. It's fun, and we recommend a friend or family. I had one couple say that now we hit really difficult stuff. We've been in GraceMarriage so long, it doesn't even seem difficult anymore because we're so equipped to handle it. It's almost instinctive. So we don't even have the troubles we used to have because now we're equipped. And the problem is, equip the saints for the work of the ministry in Ephesians 4. And unless the church equips people to be married well, most of them haven't been modeled that well in their upbringing, and they don't know how to do it. And if we start teaching people, shepherding and discipling how to do it, we change the how they do it, we change the result of what occurs. So if we change how they do marriage and their view of marriage, the outcomes will totally change. And to encourage pastors, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard to have a great marriage. If you can spend significant one-on-one time together and you make sure you're talking, connecting, you make sure you're prioritizing your intimacy together, I'll just ask pastors, how often do you have a crisis couple come into your office and say, we're dating consistently, we talk a lot, and we're just not real sure what happened, we're in a fight and we want a divorce? Never.
Yeah.
What you hear is, we don't talk, we don't spend time together, we feel isolated. No investment, no sowing and reaping is a concept that applies to marriage.
Yeah. So all of this, I think, is under the assumption that person is married to someone that is their best friend, like what you're saying, or someone that they would enjoy spending time with, or someone they would enjoy communicating with. And from what we know of marriages, there are a lot of people stuck in a marriage. I say stuck, that's not what I mean. I mean they are in a marriage with someone who is not reciprocating those things. What can you say to that person to encourage them? Like maybe they want to have a grace-filled marriage. Maybe they want to have a biblical marriage, but their spouse does not. How can you encourage them? What can you say to them?
Well, my wife could tell you, because she was married to a selfish, entrepreneurial, insensitive jerk, me. And I was that way for a year, and she cried, Lord, am I sentenced to a life of this? She felt lonely. She felt sad. She said, if I ever wrote a book, it would be just about my shattered dreams. But she said, the Lord intervened and said, Marilyn, I'm sufficient for you. I'm enough for your joy, your happiness, your beauty, your everything. It's not me plus Brad and you can be okay. So we teach to have a great marriage, you have to not need one. So Marilyn became vibrant, fun, joyful, and happy before I ever changed. And she realized that my hope in life is not dependent on Brad Rhoads getting off this success-driven lawyer track and making much of me. My hope is in Jesus Christ, who is completely sufficient for all things.
That's right.
And she even told me, she asked for my forgiveness and said, I've been asking from you what only God can give me. And I'm off your roller coaster. I'll be your wife, but I'm going to receive from the Lord Jesus, and I'm going to be a happy, vibrant woman, regardless how you want to be as a husband. Now, I'm not speaking of abuse, emotional, physical, infidelity, those things you got to prioritize protection. But in the day-to-day stuff, when you have people that aren't investing in marriage, that's the case. And you're talking about the best friend piece. Friendships are cultivated. Our first year of marriage, I would rather spend time with my brother, my dad, and my friends in Maryland. But guess who I spent most of my time with? My brother, my friends, and my dad. But when I started spending time with her and choosing her over them, after about a year, guess who I wanted to spend time with? Maryland. When I went to a game, guess who I wanted to go with? Maryland. Guess who I started enjoying more? Maryland. So where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So as I started putting more into Maryland, Maryland became my best friend. I mean, Maryland would not have told you our first year I was her best friend. In fact, she probably, if she's honest, she'd say he was my least favorite human. But once we started working on it and cultivating, man, our friendship grew and developed, because friendships are something that are cultivated and developed over time. It's not just some emotional genie that just comes over you and says, oh, here it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that testimony. That's beautiful. And we at D6, we pray for the people who listen to this podcast. So if you are one of those people like Marilyn, like Brad was describing, that's Marilyn, there's hope.
Yeah.
There is hope, right? And our hope can be in the person of Jesus. So thank you so much for sharing. Where can we find these resources?
Yeah, go to GraceMarriage.com or GraceMarriageAtHome.com. GraceMarriage.com will give you ability to contact us. And like, I don't care if you use Grace Marriage. What I care is that you disciple and shepherd marriage, is you have a culture of healthy marriage, and it's a pillar of your church. So if our model, we consult for free. So if you call us and our model's not a model you like, Re-Engage is here, other ministries are here. We just want how people do marriage to change, how the church do marriage is changed. Whatever piece the Lord had us to play, we're fine with. But unless we change how the church and people do marriage, we will not change their declining culture and family.
All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing these insights with us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, I am so blessed by this interview and inspired and challenged. He said a lot of really great things. And I love his perspective for ministry leaders, and that we've got, as churches, we've got to have a strategy for discipleship in marriages. What did you think about your just discipleship in the church for marriages and his emphasis of that?
Oh my goodness gracious. Like, I'm telling you, it was an epiphany for me. It really was. Like, he made the comment of, we have ongoing kids, youth programs. We put such an emphasis on the kids, but everybody's got not everybody, but most churches have somebody that oversees their kids ministry and youth ministry. But even some of the largest churches can have 30 staff members and not one be dedicated to marriage ministries. And I think that, yeah, it may sound selfish, but it's like, that's the job I want. If I can help families and help marriages and just pour into that, because that's the one thing I feel like I've got right in my life, and it has a lot to do with God blessing me with an incredible wife. But that's what I want to do. I want to plan things that strengthen marriage on a regular basis, not just once a year retreat, but having things that are regular in our ministries, And one of the things that he said is the importance of modeling it as pastors, because so often we can be almost married to the ministry and dating our spouse, and it's kind of different. We should be honoring our wife. That it shouldn't be dominated. Our lives should not be dominated by ministry as a pastor.
Right.
Our spouse shouldn't be getting the leftovers.
That's right. I think too, he just said, we've got to equip people to be married well. But I love towards the end where he said, friendships are cultivated over time. And I think that was a really good golden nugget that, to be married well, there's got to be intentionality, and you've got to cultivate friendship. And friendship is a two-way street. It's not me centric. I've got to consider, who is Chad? What does Chad need? What does Chad need from me? It's a give and take. It can't be, well, he needs to meet all of my needs and he needs to do things my way, and me. That's one-sided.
Yeah.
But friendship is give and take on both ends, and you're wanting to meet the needs of your spouse and focusing intentionally on doing that. And I love his perspective. I love when he talked about sowing and reaping, and how time is required to cultivate friendship in marriage. This is going to require time. You can't expect to work at the church all week long and want to draw near to your spouse, and she or he is looking at you like, well, I mean, you haven't put any time in this whole entire week. So we got to be intentional with our time every day. We've talked about, my husband and I have talked about before, sometimes in ministry, we can get like the file cabinet mentality where it's the work file, the wife file, the kids file, the baseball team file, and we can put those files away. And what I feel like Brad is really encouraging us to do is we've got to keep that spouse file open all throughout the day, not just open when you're at home.
Yes. I have a rule, and my staff knows it, that, most calls, if I'm in a meeting, I don't pick up. But if my wife calls, I will always answer the phone, because she knows if she calls me at work, and I can jump on and say, honey, is it something important? I'm on a meeting, but I don't want her to ever think that the church comes before her. And there are very rare occasions. If I'm preaching, I may not answer the phone, of course, but
Sure.
You get the deal. It's one of those things that I have allowed my life earlier in my ministry to be dominated by ministry. And I gave her the leftovers and found that is not healthy, and I'm a much better pastor when I'm prioritizing my marriage and modeling that. I love the fact that he says, if you do it, your people will do it. You are naturally modeling that for your congregation. And, I had a friend of mine tell me one time, he says, and he was a pastor. He goes, if you're a great pastor, but not a great husband, you're really not a great pastor. And it was like, oof, because so often, let's be honest, we can find our identity in that.
Yeah.
But one of the most powerful sermons I ever heard about, I didn't hear, but I heard about, a friend of mine told me, says they were at church Sunday morning, the pastor got up there and he just said, hey, I would love to be able to get up here and preach to you this morning. He goes, I've got so-and-so is going to come up and talk. He says, because me and my wife had some crosswords before I left the house this morning, and I have to go home and be with my wife. And he stepped down from the the pulpit, and walked straight out the back door. And he said, that was the most powerful sermon that he heard. The guy that preached after him, nobody remembered anything he said. What they took home is their pastor prioritized his spouse and his marriage right there in front of them in a real way.
Wow.
And so I just thought, that's what I
That's
want to do. At the
powerful.
end of the day, I don't want to go, man, I gave everything I had to the church and my spouse or my kids got the leftovers, but specifically my spouse. Lena comes first before that, God, family, and marriage. And he said, show me what your calendar looks like and I'll show you where your priorities are.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in light of that, I'm excited about kind of similar. It's a good part. It's kind of like a secondary part in our guest next week, Mr. Craig Fry, who is a part of an organization, CLC, which is a men's discipleship, transparent relational discipleship for men. He's got some great strategies for men's ministry and raising up godly men and godly leaders. So I'm excited about our conversation next week. We're praying for you to maximize moments in your marriage. If you haven't pressed in to make your husband or wife a priority, I want to just ask you to pause today and look at your schedule, whatever you need to do to press in and make your marriage a priority. We're praying for you, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.